computer now, David.
Thank you.
Okay, we're recording now. Okay, so thank you everybody for taking the time to join. As I was just saying, my name is Joshua Jones. I'm a trainer and customer educator at Zoom, and I'm going to use our favorite button, which is mute all. And you can unmute yourselves anytime you want to ask any questions. We'll have a Q&A portion at the end of this brief presentation. So really just wanted to give you kind of an informal presentation. I'll tell you a little bit about myself and what I do for Zoom, and then we'll talk about some best practices around audio, your webcams, your screen sharing, and then also I spoke to David about speaking a little bit to webinar interaction, as I know this group again is dedicated to really developing the skills for online presentation. And I'm keeping an eye on the chat somewhat, but again we'll have a Q&A portion at the end of this brief presentation. So essentially what I do for Zoom is I meet with customers day in and day out to assist them in hosting their events, whether it's a meeting or webinar. And if you're not sure what the difference is, we can talk about that too. There are some differences. Really, my job is to, I jokingly say I prevent user error, but it's a little bit more intense than that at times. So it could be, as simple as really just being there for peace of mind in case something were to go wrong, or in many cases, customers really want us to help make the pieces fit together. So it could be any number of things that I'm assisting with on a day-to-day interaction. And of course, I also really like to provide our training for our customers. So if you ever decide to drop by any of our training sessions, you'll probably see me or a couple of my colleagues. I've been working in this space, in this industry for about 10 years. I started with online meetings and webinars when I was working support at Citrix, supporting GoToMeeting, GoToWebinar, and their other services. I worked at Citrix for about 7.5 years. Unfortunately, I got caught with a round of layoffs, and it was the best thing that could have happened to me. It was so cool. At first you're like, oh, that's terrible. That's the worst thing in the world. And so I went freelance for a couple of years and had my own small business, which is a little bit dusty now, called The Webinerd. And the whole point of that was just do my best to help people improve their communications. I had a few clients that said they wouldn't stop working with me, so they kind of forced me into it. So I did that for a couple of years and had some great experiences with customers, and then got recruited by Zoom. And it was kind of funny. I was on Facebook. I sent a message to somebody who's like, hey, from Citrix, hey, remember me? And they're like, you need to come work for us now. I was like, okay, just saying hi, So it was kind of funny, and it was kind of flattering to be recruited like that. And they kind of came after me with a good offer. So I really like the work that I do. It's a lot of fun. It's very rewarding for me. And I hope that comes across in the way I speak with you folks today. So first thing I want to talk to you about with regard to best practices in your meetings and webinars. And best practices when it comes to audio, screen sharing, webcam, that's all the same in meetings and webinars. So if you haven't tried Zoom for your webinars yet, the interface that you're used to seeing in these meetings is very much what you will see in your webinars. There are some features and functionality that are a little bit different. So Zoom will offer you an opportunity at a pretty fair price as well, compared to the competition, to jump into webinars. You can add that to your meeting platform. So let's talk about best practices with regard to audio first. And this is one of those things that I just cannot talk about enough, because it is so very easy to goof it up, plain and simple. And I'm just going to bring up a background slide so my dirty desktop isn't sitting there with all those exposed files on my desktop. Okay, now I'm going to share my screen. And what I want to share with you are the meeting settings, are the software settings for Zoom. And I can get here a couple of different ways. So if you're looking at the Zoom application, you'll find the settings option up there at the top. It should be very, very similar on the Ring Central app. Another way that you can get to this settings tab, if you look down at the bottom left-hand corner on your display next to the audio or webcam icon, you'll see that little up arrow, and you can go into meeting, or you could go into the audio options or video options, depending on which menu you decide to click on. But the point is we want to get to audio options because I want to express to you that you should always, 100% of the time, ever, forever and ever, the most hyperbolic statement ever, always use a headset with very, very limited exception. And it looks like your group has a pretty good handle on that so far, but let me explain to you why. I'm using a headset now. This is a wireless headset. It's a Sennheiser wireless headset. I like the Sennheiser brand. I trust them. I've been using audio, microphones, and headphones and so forth for many, many years. And I've always found the Sennheiser brand really reliable. Now, this happens to be a wireless headset, which means it's going to thin out my signal a little bit. We're tossing information through mid-air. In order to do that, we have to compress that information. And so the signal is going to be a little bit more thin than if I switch over to my wired headset. Okay, so this is a Sennheiser headset, same brand, different model, much less expensive, has a wire, is going to probably sound a little bit more full. And you guys can give me your opinions on this if you want to. Now notice where my bounce meter is jumping up to. It's getting maybe about 3 from top, 2 from the top at sometimes. Now I'm back on the wireless headset. Again, 2 or 3 from the top typically. And notice where the volume meter is set. Now I'm going to switch over to my webcam microphone. This is the microphone that's built into my webcam. Notice where the volume meter is set. It's a lot further down, but it's bouncing up to the top. Why? Because this microphone is supposed to pick up every bit of noise it could possibly hear. Whereas this headset microphone, it's picking up sound that's right in its field of listening, if you will. Okay, it's a very directional microphone. Now I'm going to switch over to the built-in microphone on my computer. And notice where the volume meter is. Notice where it's bouncing to. And to boot, that microphone's over there on a different computer or a different screen. So it's not sitting right in front of me, so it's positioned poorly. Now, aside from being a lot louder, so I'm back to my webcam microphone, aside from being a lot louder, it's a messy sound. If I sit here quietly, you could potentially hear the fan in the background. If there's noise on my desk, typing sounds, if there's noise in the background, you're going to hear every bit of it. I'm back over to my headset mic, typing sounds, thumping on the desk, not nearly as loud, right? So because we're keeping down that background noise, it's also keeping down noise that, you know, when you speak, it fills up the room and it bounces back to you off of the walls. And when you're using a desktop microphone or maybe a webcam styled microphone, it's picking up all that reflected sound is the term we use there. So unless you're in a really well sound treated booth and have professional quality microphones and audio equipment, the headset is going to just give you the easiest solution with the least amount of effort. So I can't really deride you too much any further about headsets. So let's switch over to using video. I mean, there are other options for audio. If you want a really professional, like I'm on the radio kind of sound, you'll want to, you know, go a step above having a headset microphone and have a professional quality room microphone. But then you're going to need to look at treating the room for sound and those harsh reflections. Okay, now video best practices. There's not much to talk about here. I can give you a few tips that will make your video quality better. And the first tip is don't use your built-in webcam. So I just switched over to, this is a Mac computer, so it has a built-in FaceTime webcam. It's sitting in the wrong place. I can't zoom it in, so I'd have to lean in real far if I actually wanted to square up my image in the field for you. Otherwise, I'm sitting way back here. and that doesn't look great. Now, the other thing, it's starting to get, well, the light's starting to dim here a little bit in California, but if it were any darker than this, you would hardly be able to see me, and the image actually pixelates a lot. So right now I'm getting decent light for this camera, but let me switch over to my external webcam. It's a larger camera lens, so it picks up more light. Just gives me more light, especially as the light starts to dim. This camera will perform a lot better than that built-in webcam. So benefits to using the external webcam: larger image. Just grab one for our larger lens, I should say. So it collects more light, a little bit more accurate in representing the light in your space, and works better in a low light situation as well. And this particular one, this one happens to be a Logitech webcam. Again, I don't really endorse any brands, neither does Zoom, but this is a very popular webcam. And if you go look at those top 10 lists, you know, top 10 best webcams, this one's always on it, and it's usually #1. So the Logitech C920, they have others in the C900 series as well. Other things that I would say about webcam, 16:9 is the standard now. Nobody's using 4:3 really. You can enable HD. We have something that's a little bit new if you want to go with that Barbara Walters filter. You know, everything's a little bit washed out, but you can't tell I have these beautiful freckles now. But it would also touch up other blemishes. So there's a little bit of a vanity setting in there if you want the touch up feature turned on. Now, information that we talk about with regard to webcam can carry over to using the green screen or virtual background tool as well. And I don't use the green screen myself because I love this picture that's behind me and that my friend painted, and I use this so much, I don't want anything going wrong. You know, if all of a sudden, for some reason, my green screen images aren't there, I don't have to panic to try to replace them. So I don't prefer to use it myself. And if you're going to use it, I'd highly recommend, like anything else, use it to effect. Use it with a purpose. Don't just use it because you can. So the green screen can allow you to put any image behind you, a company logo. I know you guys have done some talking about that. But one thing that I want to mention as a best practice with the green screen is lighting. And it's the same, you know, best practices that you would use without the green screen. You want to have 2 lights in front of you typically. One off to your left axis and one off to your right axis. Yeah, my video mirroring is turned off, by the way, so I might be pointing in the wrong direction. Okay, so you have those 2 lights in front of you that make an axis in front of your face. And usually you want to have one of those sides just a little bit more dim or distant, so it does give you some contrast. Now this is for, you know, that studio lighting effect. And the third light you want to have is what we call a key light. And the key light sits behind you and puts light onto the green screen, so it helps you sit apart from the green screen so that you don't blend in. Okay, so tips on the green screen, really just around lighting, and having an external webcam, it'll improve the quality of the image. The other bit that I wanted to talk to you with regard to best practices, we can talk a little bit about screen sharing if you'd like to, but I think that's maybe not such a crucial item as webinar best practices for interaction. So let me move over there. Best practices for interaction. What can you say? I mean, it's so full of opinion, and it's so subjective based on the type of event that you're hosting. So typically when people ask me, you know, how do I get more interactive? I have to ask them, what reason do you have to interact? You know, aside from answering questions from your attendees, what are your goals with the interaction? Are you hoping they learn something, or are you trying to learn something yourself? So that's every interaction has to have a point. Just like everything you put in your presentation needs to have a point. You know, you're not going to put some wild animation that starts spinning things around for no reason, I hope. I really hope. You know, you're going to do something that has, you're going to do something for effect. So make sure that interaction has effect. Now, there are a few things that you can do to interact with your participants in your webinar. And one of the easiest things is use the hand raising tool. Quickly, people can put up their hand. I don't know if you guys use it maybe in these events from time to time, but if you look at your participants list, you can raise your hand and we can see who has their hand raised. In a webinar, that can be really crucial for a quick response, a yes or no question, a this or that type of question. You're starting to feel like you're losing people's attention. Zoom has some tools that lets you know, are people starting to multitask? You know, other services have these. I'm not just talking about Zoom. Other services provide those tools as well. And you can use what we call attention monitoring. And you can see if maybe people are starting to multitask, you know, they're drifting away. And I'm just gonna come up with a question real quick and say, you know what, let me know about this one. Do you agree? Go ahead and raise your hand if you agree. And at least I'm gonna get some of those people to start interacting. Lou, I see that Lou agrees. Thank you, Lou. Jeff, you agree. Okay, good. So it's easy to tell, even in the webinar platform where attendees are a little bit more anonymous, it's really easy to tell people have put their hand up. So a lot of times I'll ask, you know, who's familiar with this feature? Have you ever used this before? Do you plan to use it? And people will put up their hands. I say, okay, we've got 4 or 5 people that have used this feature. Then I'll explain the feature and say, is that new information? Did you know it was available? Raise your hand if you think you'd like to use that. So at a couple points, I've given people a chance to raise their hand, different sets of people, just by asking, you know, yes or no. Do you do this? Do you like this? So hand raising is crucial. Polling questions are very useful as well, but what do you say? How many polling questions can you really ask? And there's information out there that says that you should interact with your participants every minute, or every 5 minutes, or every 10 minutes, depending on who you talk to. Are you really gonna launch a polling question every 5 minutes? I hope you don't. I mean, unless you've got some really good purposes to launch each of those polling questions. So again, make it count. You can't just throw up a polling question because you think you're supposed to at that time. Get the information you're looking for, make it a worthwhile polling question, not just do you understand yes or no type of polling question. And then another interaction point, don't hesitate to tell people to type into the Q&A panel. Tell me what you think about this. If you ask a polling question that's this, that, or other, tell them to write into the Q&A. Tell me what you would put in there for other. What are we missing from this list? So there's a lot of opportunity to ask people to submit questions through Q&A and so forth, and really add a level of engagement, which helps people to, well, stay entertained, which is part of what we're doing, right? I know we don't want to be thought of as entertainers necessarily, but it's really what we are doing. There may be a message that we're conveying with our entertainment, but yeah, that's usually the case anyway, right? So, you know, if we're out there to entertain, use those engagement tools however you can to entertain, and keep people fascinated and curious about what you're going to do next. It's a great opportunity to really impress people very easily in the webinar environment. Oh, I didn't think you could do that, you know? So I've seen a couple questions come in a chat, and I definitely don't want to take up too much of your time. Again, sorry for my discombobulation this evening. Carol had asked, how do you see if people are multitasking? Carol, Zoom has a feature called attention monitoring. If you have a Zoom account, you can log in at zoom.us and view the meeting settings page. And under meeting settings and advanced settings, it would be attention tracking. Essentially what that does is just put a little clock next to somebody's name if they click away from Zoom. If Zoom's the most forward application on their computer, it stays there. Another thing you folks might be seeing that might not be turned on other accounts you've seen, we also have the nonverbal feedback. So I can, you know, aside from just raising my hand, I can say yes, no, go faster, go slower without actually verbalizing. I can, you know, put a little clapping hand next to my name. Now those should be in the participant list if you look to that. I can't really show you the attention monitor because, well, I could take a screenshot. Do me a favor and try to click away from Zoom. Just click to some other application, and I'll take a quick screenshot here. And let's see, is anybody doing it? Ooh, I may not have it on this account. It's not popping up for me. Okay, I can't take a screenshot of it because it's not turned on for this particular account. It is turned on for the training account that I usually use for sessions like this. Okay, so David has offered we can go a little bit long if you want to stay to have a little bit more Q&A. Please feel free to put those questions in. And go ahead and unmute to ask your questions verbally. I'll keep looking through the list to see if I can pick out some more.
Joshua.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry. Quick one from me if I can. Can you break the chat screen away from the main meeting screen? It's something that I noticed that we could do, or we can do in Ring Central, but I'm just, because it would be useful to have the chat on a separate screen.
Yeah, if you see me looking over to the side now, my chat's way over there. It's not in front of me right now. And when you're presenting, that's really crucial. So yes, you can break out the chat. You can dock it to the meeting interface. And if you see that it's docked now, just up at the top, you should see a little down arrow that allows you to undock it. Let me just remind myself.
Breakout.
Right at the top, breakout or pop out, depending on whether you're Mac or Windows. So yes, move it around, tuck it into the corner of your display or onto a second display really helps a ton. So that's another way that you can keep things engaging, especially in your webinars. If you're responding to questions right away, people are going to ask you a lot more questions. So if your point is to answer those questions, start answering questions early. And the more, the sooner you answer questions, the more people will ask their questions. It's kind of that monkey see, monkey do kind of thing.
Joshua, it's Carol here. My question is related more to the way in which you change the experience for more interactivity, especially for Toastmasters when it's a training session. So you might have one person like yourself who's doing a presentation. You would then need to schedule in others who would have a longer period of time to interact with you and with others. What's your experience there, and how might you advise us to do it better in online presenters?
Okay, so you gave me a little bit of a scenario that I didn't follow exactly. So it sounded like you, can you just state that again so I have a little bit more understanding?
Yeah, I'm talking now about Toastmaster training sessions. This is my particular field of experience and a passion, so that we need to have interactivity happening in an online training session. Otherwise, it's just a passive learning, which would not attract people to come. So how many different presenters would you envisage in a, say, 1.5 to 2 hour session? And how might you schedule those for better interactivity?
I see. Okay. And I like that you're getting to the point. How many voices should I have on the call? Because it gets hard to listen to one person. We have a training session that's 90 minutes long, and it's literally you listening to my voice for 90 minutes, and I talk about all sorts of stuff. And I know that's exhausting. That's not exactly what people want to do all the time. So having those other voices come into the conversation, especially if you're looking at 90 minutes or upwards of 2 hours, is really crucial. Having a more conversational tone with the presentation, where you can really, even if it's staged, even if it's really planned out ahead of time, you get that conversational tone in there, that back and forth, and it's way more compelling than just one person sitting and talking stone-faced and stoic. So yes, absolutely bring in those voices. How many voices? I don't like to answer questions like that. That's like, how often should I launch a poll? I'm not going to tell you. But I would say in that situation, if it were me, I'd probably want at least a few voices in there, 2, 3, probably not many more than 3 for that amount of time. And then with regard, and you're right, active training is a lot different than that really passive, okay, I'm just sitting here in lecture mode. So having those voices trade back and forth, it really does pull your attendees into the conversation more, and they will ask more questions and be more interactive, I think.
Thank you, Joshua. I was interested in how you might use the breakout rooms for those extra interactive sessions with smaller groups, and then bring them back to the main room.
Yes, absolutely. Now, I'm unlucky if I don't get to use breakout rooms in my training scenario. I really wish I had an opportunity to, but it's kind of hard when you're dealing, with 50 to 100 people in a session, and you can't split them into a breakout room and be in every breakout room. I think breakout rooms are a great way for people to raise the level of interaction and the exchange of information, because you get an opportunity to interact with your peers and see what they're understanding. What are they taking from this? So breakout rooms are great. Breakout rooms are not a feature of the webinar platform. Those are only in meetings though, which is more like the classroom or conference room type of scenario. Okay.
Yeah.
So absolutely. Did that kind of get to where you were hoping to go?
Yes and no.
Okay.
I'm really keen to explore the breakout sessions in Zoom for training for our District 73, so I will explore in depth.
Gotcha. Okay, sounds good. And please, another question. I'm just looking through the list here. There's a lot of questions in there that I think we've somewhat addressed so far.
Well, let me bring one up. Advice on what to do when things go wrong. I think that one of the main things we learn in Toastmasters is how to cope when things go wrong. And it seems like stuff I've had experience of giving a Hangouts on Air webinar where I was sharing the wrong screen for probably 5-10 minutes and didn't realize it because I couldn't see the controls. But I guess it's really a question about keeping your cool.
That's true. And you know what? I'm pretty spoiled right now too. I don't know what I'd do if something, well, I was trying to join your meeting and I couldn't, and I just,
yeah.
What happened? Like I stone panicked. I didn't get it. With Zoom, it is really easy to get kind of spoiled. Other platforms I've seen do put up those little hurdles for you a little more often, but I've had a really smooth experience with Zoom, and the thousands of attendees that I've had attend webinars that I've hosted. It's just such a small handful of times that people have had problems. So I've been really impressed with it. You know, it really is a smoother way to do this online stuff.
Well, can you answer the meta question though about how you keep your cool? I mean, I think one of the reasons we have this club is to give people practice. You know, you say in Toastmasters you practice amongst friends so that when it really counts in a business setting, you're able to do it more effectively. With any kind of
absolutely. So a lot of, I mean, keeping cool under pressure is kind of a natural thing for some people and not for others, right? I've always been lucky that, you know, the worst thing I'm going to do in a high stress situation is crack a terrible joke. And it's probably going to be really bad. And otherwise, I stay pretty calm and I just deal with what's in front of me. So the main piece of advice, if all of a sudden you hit one of those oh no moments, my first piece of advice would be take a breath and think about what just happened. Don't start reacting right away. Give it a moment. And if it's, you know, in an online meeting environment, we're talking about things like background noise or echo. Yeah, we can deal with that with a quick mute all. But your internet connection goes down or something like that, that's catastrophic. There's nothing that Zoom can do to fix that or any other provider can do to fix that. So the best advice is really just take a moment to take it in, take a breath, do your best to understand what's going on before you start reacting. The next thing you need to do, especially if you're live, is tell people what's going on. I've been in webinars where, oh yeah, we can tell something's going wrong, buddy, but you're not telling us what's going wrong, and we think you're a fish flopping on the shore. And it's getting harder and harder to watch. And now we've all disconnected because we can't take more than 5 minutes of that. So really communicating. I think I got this from my customer service training, you know, working with customer front lines, technical support. What's going on? Okay, this is what I can do. This is what we understand. This is what I'm going to do to help. Giving them that explanation, they're going to stick around a little longer and be patient with you. So, hey, this is what's going on, everybody. I'm having a little trouble with my computer. I'm doing my best to fix it. Really appreciate your patience. I'll be with you just as soon as I can. And if you can't fix it within the first minute or two, you might want to consider bringing things down and rescheduling. Because I think one of the worst experiences I've ever had is had somebody just keeping us dangling too long. Like, you're not going to fix this one, guy.
Jeff Otten also has his virtual hand raised.
Oh, I think he did that when I was talking earlier. I don't know if he had a question.
Joshua, Graham here, a specific question which came up from another member, but which interests me. What's the best practice for screen sharing? I've noticed one of the things that happens when we're sharing screens, for example, is that often we bring up the background to our PowerPoint presentation rather than the presentation itself. Are there ways that we can avoid that sort of thing happening using Zoom.
So you mean when you launch into screen sharing, you're showing like the build view of PowerPoint and the notes of course, instead of showing the slideshow?
And tells everybody what you're going to be telling them over the next 5 minutes, so you might as well not have told them at all. Yeah.
Yes, that is a very valid point. What is one thing to consider? Do you have one monitor or two? If you do have multiple monitors and you go PowerPoint into slideshow mode, you're going to get that presenter view, if you've seen that before, where you can see the notes. So when you're, let me pull up a slide here. I'm just gonna make sure I'm on the right side before I show my screen. Okay, this is going to get kind of bright if your room is dark, sorry. Okay, so as you can see here, we're looking at the screen sharing portion. When you select to share your screen within Zoom, we do give you those little thumbnails, so it makes it pretty easy to know what you're about to share. I really like the design there. And really all you have to do is click to highlight what you'd like to share. Now in this scenario, let's say you've got your PowerPoint presentation up. It's in full screen or slideshow mode. So you're going to see more than one PowerPoint window. One might look like this, that edit version, and then one's going to look like it's actually the slide in full slideshow mode. So you can choose to share that specific application, but keep in mind when PowerPoint's in slideshow mode, it acts like that slideshow is a separate window from the actual PowerPoint presentation. And that varies a little bit based on whether you're on Mac or Windows, but essentially the functionality is the same. And that is function of PowerPoint, that when it's in slideshow mode, it essentially does act like it's a separate window. Now, to avoid ever goofing up with that, I usually just show my entire desktop. I always have two monitors when I'm presenting or whenever I can. And so I'll have my slides on monitor 2. And that's the only thing that's on monitor 2. I'll just make sure that that is set up and ready to go. It doesn't have to be in slideshow mode, but it's more professional if we start it when it's already in slideshow mode. Now, if I need to make a transition from showing that to something else, I like to pause my screen sharing. So next to the new share option, you'll be able to pause your screen sharing and freeze right there. So you can make those transitions as smooth as possible. So if you're not sure if you're in slideshow mode yet, you can take a moment to be sure before you click to resume your screen sharing. So really, I most of the time share my entire display so that I can pull up anything I want to. Let's switch over to my web browser, which is minimized, and then we'll switch back to the PowerPoint presentation. I have a lot of flexibility there. And then I can pause my screen sharing to help make those transitions as smooth as possible. I think the pausing feature really ups the level of professionalism if you need to switch out of PowerPoint mode to showing something else.
This is Carol Borhansky. If you have shared the screen with somebody else, such as the Toastmaster of the day, and you want to get it back, how do you get it back?
That depends on what your role is in the meeting. So if you look down the participant list, I am the host of today's meeting because we had to use my account all of a sudden. If we were on somebody else's meeting, in David's meeting, we would have been on his account. He would have been the host. So in the case of the screen sharing specifically, let me back up this slide a couple steps. There's a couple things that the host can do under this up arrow menu, which I don't have a screenshot of, but I'm going to take one right now. So I'm going to click that up arrow. And there's some advanced settings under that up arrow. And now I just need to find the screenshot. Which is buried on my screen somewhere. Where to go? Is that it?
In the meantime, talk amongst yourselves.
Yeah. No, I'm sorry. I'm having trouble locating that screenshot. So essentially, if you click that little up arrow, let me bring the slide back again. And only the host can do this, but you click the up arrow and it's going to give you an option for advanced options. And I don't usually discuss this in our training sessions because I think it confuses people. So thanks for asking. You'll click the little up arrow and you'll see an option for advanced sharing options. And when you click there, it's going to ask you who can share. So if you one of the options is who can share when somebody else is already sharing. Now, by default, only the host can do that. That means only the host of the meeting can take the screen sharing from somebody else and start showing their own name. But under those advanced options, you could switch it over so that anyone could take screen sharing anytime. So I hope that helps. Again, only the host can do that by default, or a co-host. If you want to use the co-host controls, you might start designating a co-host or two for the Toastmaster to assist in the session. I'm trying to go back to my Toastmasters knowledge. It's been a little bit, but I would say, you know, your dedicated Toastmaster for the event should probably have the host role. And so in this session, I can find Carol and I can give her the host control, and I'm going to do that now. Okay, so Carol, now you're in charge. I could potentially leave if I needed to.
Well, one of the things we ran into is maybe it's the Ring Central Meetings version, but there's supposed to be a control that says take back host control, and apparently that we could not find that. I found it in the documentation. We didn't find it in the actual software.
Oh, okay. So now I'm going to put my mouse over Carol's name again. Where'd it go? Claim host. Okay, so it's at the bottom. If you look at the very bottom of the participants list from the host perspective, there's a more menu. You might not see it from your perspective now, and one of those options is to claim host. So if you're watching, the host control is going to go back to my name now.
All right. Well, we should wrap this up. Thank you for staying with us a little extra time. And
yes, thank you, everybody.
And we might follow up with. I have a whole long question I could ask you about. We have a problem with the timer. The timer in a Toastmasters club traditionally signals with a red, green, yellow, red, or even with timing cards. And what happens is we lose track of the little thumbnail view of the timer, and so it's difficult for the speaker to know if they're running over unless we give some kind of audible clue. But
I hear you.
Well, I'll let you think about that, and maybe you can follow up with a suggestion for us.
I'll marinate on that a little bit. Actually, you know what? I know we are going to be implementing a timer, like a stopwatch type of timer, but still that doesn't give the full effect that you need with the Toastmasters, with the the timekeeper doing the yellow and red warning. Yeah, I'll take some feedback. I could see using the nonverbal feedback, but the downside of that is they've got to be paying attention to the participant list to see
exactly
that.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
okay. So yeah, that is a little bit of a challenge.
Say good night for this evening, and thank you very much for joining us. Everybody, it's been a little bit of an extra adventure, I know, but thanks for sticking with us, and we hope you come back.
Thanks, everyone.
To see a regular meeting, if there is such a thing for this group.
Exactly. Thanks so much for your time, everybody. Enjoy your day.
Have a good night.